I actually speak to a lot of coaches. I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of coaches since I started this work, mostly because I'm curious and I want to know what other people are doing and how they've approached the work. And I just have been a real connoisseur of this craft.
Mhm.
And oftentimes what I find is they are convinced by someone else or something else that in order to be successful, they have to kind of follow a certain script. And I think one of the most beautiful things about coaching is that there really isn't a script. There are so many different types of coaching, types of support. And the coaching, in my experience, the best coaches in the world that many of whom I know, I feel so grateful to know, what they do better than anyone is their truth. They're honest about what their strengths are, what their desires and interests are in terms of how they want to serve. And they just follow that. And they don't listen to, structures and formulas that might not resonate with them.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Rexhen, and today's guest is Nate Hurd, founder of the Hurden Group, an executive coach and host of the Rich Life Lab podcast. Nate guides visionary founders and executives who feel called to something greater, helping them break through invisible barriers and create a life that's rich not only in business success, but also in purpose, relationships, and fulfillment. Before founding the Hurden Group, he spent 20 years as a senior executive in one of the world's largest FinTech companies, where as chief growth officer, he led 8 consecutive years of 100% growth, scaling to $1.6 billion in annual revenue across 42 global businesses. And it's a pleasure for me to have him on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Nate.
Thank you, Rexhen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming, Nate. It's a pleasure for us to have you on. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about your beginnings as a coach. First of all, what inspired you to become a coach and then start your own coaching business, Hurden Group?
So it's, looking back, it seems so clear, but really my career led me directly to this moment and to the work I now do. And so for many years, when I was in my business career, as you mentioned kindly before, over the course of 20 years, we grew this company, which was really a network of companies, from about 4 companies under an umbrella parent company to, towards the end of my career there, about 42 companies. And so it was a massive experience of growth. I mean, it was extraordinary. I learned so many things and so many functional skills along the way. But one of the things I realized was the thing the company needed most at a certain point was development of new leadership, of strong leadership, because we were launching new companies and we were significantly scaling the companies that we already had. And so I started focusing intently on developing leaders within the organization. Ultimately, these 42 companies each had their own CEO and their own executive team. And so during that process, early on, probably 15 years ago, I hired a coach for myself because I felt kind of like I needed an upgrade in my own leadership. And that experience, I felt very fortunate to have an excellent coach who helped me in many ways. And I was hooked. I mean, after that, I really believed in the power of coaching and I understood what it could do. And then in developing leaders, really coaching more than anything else was what I was doing. And so I was in that environment, that specific environment, for over 17 years. And probably especially the last, 5 to 7 years, I was really coaching directly, spending a lot of time effectively coaching, and I loved it. I mean, it was the most fulfilling thing I had done in my entire career by far. And it was the most impactful thing that I had done to move the company forward, to actually help grow the bottom line of the business and the organization overall. And so I realized at some point during that time, it clicked for me, like, this is really something that, I'm doing something I really love. I feel inspired by, is deeply fulfilling, and it's creating real results. And so there came a point in time where I was I was serving on the board. I was asked to stay. And then I decided, I had been there for 17 years, and I asked myself the question, can I imagine myself here for another 17 years? Or do I think I've done what I came here to do? And the answer was I had completed my time there. I realized that, and I wanted to go pursue coaching more fully outside of the frame of an enterprise so that I could work with clients directly, completely, objectively, fully, and really serve them. And so ever since then, that's what I've been doing. And so, as I said, looking back, it all sort of makes sense, but it's certainly, unfolded step by step along the way.
Cool. And so right now with the Hurden Group, it's been about 3 years and something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since you've started it.
That's right.
So when working with your clients right now and going through the coaching journey with them, what about it do you find most rewarding?
I would say the thing that I find most rewarding is to help people shatter the sort of misconceptions they have about what progress looks like, about what success looks like. For example, I find that a lot of times we all have behaviors, we all have aspects of ourselves that we might not like that much, or we feel are getting in our way. Right. And we may think that success, quote unquote, is alleviating ourselves completely of those patterns or of those beliefs. But what I found is that in most cases, certain patterns will continue to exist forever as part of each of us. So it's not really about alleviating or eradicating. It's really more about accepting, loving, and appreciating some beauty in every part of who we are. And from that place, leading a life that instead of being, unconsciously absorbed by our patterns, being consciously aware of them and learning to dance with them and use them. And so I think the thing I love most about my work is to help people sort of reimagine themselves, their lives, and their potential in a whole new way, much more from a place of understanding and embrace than we oftentimes think. And so I'll give you just one other quick example. I think I've come across, and I used to think this, I thought this for many years, that a great relationship was a relationship where there was equanimity and harmony and bliss most of the time, all the time, even. And I just, in a similar way, I've realized that that's not true. It's just not true. The greatest relationships I know, and I'm very grateful to be married for 15 years now, and I hope to be for many more, but the greatest relationships I know, they fight just the same. But what they've gotten good at is understanding that fighting and disagreement and disconnection is part of a healthy relationship, and then finding ways to repair and come back together quickly. So this plays out in business, in our own sense of self, in our relationships. And that's the thing that I find most inspiring.
Interesting. I'd find it weird if in a relationship there would be no fights and would be all smooth and it would just be strange because it would be not natural. It's like, let's say, the relationship you'd have with ChatGPT, because there's no fights there. Usually when you think about any conversation you have with the AI, it's always going to agree with you. It's never going to say you're wrong. So that makes sense and makes us human. So
that's right. And many people realize that, and yet in the middle of a fight, they can convince themselves that something's wrong. Same thing. In the middle of a pattern, they can convince themselves that something's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of embrace. So
interesting that you brought that same concept also in business. So we talked about kind of like who you work with, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that specific ideal client profile. If they happen to listen, we mentioned that they are executives, but they also work with executives and their teams. How would you describe like the ideal client profile for you?
So this is an edit. Okay. So yeah. I actually work mostly with founders.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So if you want to rephrase that, or if you want me to just answer with that, you tell me.
I'll rephrase that. So just for the editor, I'm just going to rephrase this question. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the people that you work with. So we did mention a little bit on the intro that you're working with founders, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what that ideal client profile is. Is there a specific industry or a specific demographic of these, or do they have some common goals, some other commonalities that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am a conscious capitalist at heart. I believe deeply that so much of the prosperity, of the beauty, of the connection in the world has come from great entrepreneurs who have built extraordinary businesses. And I think many of the problems of the world and opportunities are going to be unlocked and solved through business, through capitalism. And yet sometimes there are, like there are in everywhere else, in politics, in medicine, there are excesses. There are, quote, crony capitalists or crooked politicians, etc. Right? But I really believe that capitalism done through the lens of a higher consciousness, of really thinking holistically about all the various groups of stakeholders and the ultimate impact that the business can create, is one of the greatest sets of ideas that humans have ever created. And so I tend to work with entrepreneurs who are either on their first business, their first mountain, or in many cases have created something before and are now on to their second business and are conscious, conscious and thoughtful, and approach business with a real reverence and an appreciation for how much value and impact it can create. And so there's actually a book called Conscious Capitalism that was written by John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods grocery stores. And I know him, and it's just that's who I've tended to work with, is people who are working on something that they feel really passionate about and they believe will make a dent in humanity or the world.
So it's not limited on how big this first business is, right?
No. In fact, I mean, I have clients now who are in the very early stages of launching a company. And then I have clients who have large global businesses as well. So I'm pretty agnostic there. What gets me most excited is when someone either believes very, very deeply that the thing that they're working on has the potential to change the world, even in a small way. Some people can get incredibly excited about things that other people have a hard time connecting with, but they believed very deeply in the work that they're doing. It's that spark that I think is so beautiful. Or in some cases, people close one season of life. They finish a company or a chapter, and they're excited to do something next, and they have that fire inside, but they don't exactly know what it is yet. I love working with people, and I often do in that capacity too.
So how does it look like to work with you? Is it, I can assume it's one-on-one coaching? Is there also group coaching? Do you happen to work, if they have a team or small team, do you happen to help their team as well? How is the engagement?
So I tend to work with the leaders, and the leaders ultimately ripple out into their teams. And in many cases, I will, depending on the client, but oftentimes I will end up speaking to people close to them. But I usually work directly with the leaders, because the highest point of leverage in any organization is the leader. And so much can cascade from that. So I do mostly one-on-one individual work. For me, the greatest gift that a human being can give another human being is to take the time to get to know them deeply and personally, better than anyone, and walk with them as they, create and evolve. And so that's where I spend most of my time. I partner with an organization where I do a couple as well. And usually those are folks in the second mountain phase who have been successful, and now they're looking for purpose and impact. But yeah, most of it's one-on-one.
And where do people usually find you? So in terms of marketing, and this goes to that research that I mentioned, what marketing channel is working really well for you?
So the business that I was in the FinTech world for a long time was very media driven. So there was a lot of large scale marketing funnels and webinars and so on and so forth. And when I got into coaching, this work to me is very personal. And so many of my clients, they'll come through referrals from other clients. Most, I would say at this point, come through referrals. But the other place that they tend to come through is just meeting people walking through life. And I'm part of a few organizations that really inspire me, like Conscious Capitalism, like Principled Business is another network. And these organizations I find inspiring. And so they host events and I attend them. But oftentimes I meet people through either the people I know or the places that I go. I tend, at least at this point, I've done podcasting, as you mentioned. I have a podcast, but most I would say are either referrals or through live events.
It has been the case actually with a good part of the coaches that I've interviewed, where the clients that they get are mostly from either referrals or a lot of these live events, as you said, is a kind of like a more personal relationship. So yeah, it does make sense that it is that way compared to like having a lot of media. Maybe LinkedIn is another space too. I don't know if you've utilized it as much or not.
When I started this, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had a long career, and I was happy if I just had a few clients and just sort of, enjoyed it part time. But I was very surprised at how quickly I was busy, much busier than I expected. And it's pretty much stayed that way ever since. So I certainly understand the benefits. I actually love writing, and I love, podcasting. And so I've done these things out of the sheer joy of doing them. But I've been very grateful to have had a number of wonderful clients and have stayed consistently busy. So I haven't done a lot of media, although I think about it from time to time. But the work is very personal. And I think one thing that's really important in coaching is finding a connection with someone who you can trust, and that is, in my experience, best happens through either someone who knows you already and can make a warm introduction based on their own experience, or through an in-person connection of some sort. And having said that, you can see I'm sitting in my office right now, quote unquote, and most of the coaching I do is actually remote, though the connections come largely through a more personal channel.
Right now, where you mentioned like early on you started, it was this thing where you would be happy to do it part-time, have just a few clients. Right now, you're much busier. Where do you see it going next? Do you have any specific goals you're working towards for the next 1 to 3 years?
Yes. So I have a few goals. I have 2 young children, 8 and 10. And so my personal life is busy in that regard, but I feel very full. My goal really is to serve 500 founders in the coming years, in the near term. And I think from there, I may also do some public speaking, and I do some other things as well. But I think my focus really is to find and work with founders who are working on things that I feel inspired by, that are going to, make a real impact in the future. And so that's my near-term goal, I would say, is to work with 500 founders. And I'm well on my way. I've worked with well over 150 at this point, and continuing. That's
cool. I like it. And you want to maintain it also in a way where this doesn't get you too busy, where you don't have much time left for family and things like that.
The reason that I love this work, there's many reasons I love this work, but one of them is because if I'm really going to serve my clients, then one of the best ways I can do that is to pay attention to my own life, to the places where I'm placing my own attention, to the presence that I'm giving to my family, to my colleagues, to my work. And in creating that and in nourishing that, I'm far more helpful in service. And so that's really been one of the great joys of this work, is that in order to serve clients well, I am consistently paying attention to how my own life feels, how my own life is unfolding. Because one of the things that I love more than anything working with clients is helping them remember how to dream. Most of us, when we're at some point in life, we have a dream. We have a dream that feels really inspiring. But in my experience, most adults have forgotten how to dream. And that's for a lot of reasons. For just the set of responsibilities we have, the commitments, the worries and apprehensions that we develop over time, the stories and narratives we hear. And remembering how to dream and living from a place of dreaming is one of the great gifts, certainly of my life, and one of the great gifts I help to share with the clients that I work with. And so that's been a consistent part of how I live in order to do the work that I do.
It's amazing we live in this time right now where you can just work from home, like take Zoom calls and just like do it all remotely, especially with coaching. It's a thing where it allows you to do all of that. I was just thinking like coaching, because I've had coaches that have done this up to 50 years before. So it wasn't even called coaching back then, but it wasn't done remotely. They might have taken some calls on the phone and try to help through the phone, but usually they would fly out to meet their clients to talk in person. So right now it's great that we have this opportunity to do this all remotely. I'm not a coach myself. I don't do coaching, but I'm just grateful even for the type of work that I do, that I get to do it remotely. So yeah, that is amazing. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you also, in terms of investments in your coaching business, what would you say have been some good investments that you feel really good about? Either you got a good return from it, or you learned a lot from it? And what would be some investments that you feel like you should have probably avoided them, or maybe not so good investments?
So I would say that most coaches that struggle are focused on the things that are other than having conversations with people that they find inspiring, right? The thing that leads to coaching is conversations. And honestly, I don't really approach the world looking for clients. I just move through the world with a deep sense of curiosity about people. And so I'm very interested in what they're up to and what they feel excited about and what they feel is holding them back from the things that they believe in. And so I would say one of the best investments I've made is probably this camera that you're looking at right now is one of the better investments because it helps to create a deeper connection with clients in a remote setting. I love to see clients in person, and I do whenever possible, but most of the coaching happens this way. And it's important that there's as much connection as possible through the remote environment. And so I would say that is something that has been wonderful. It's helped to foster greater and greater connection in the coaching and better results as a follow on. And then I would say the things that I have invested in are mostly related to time. Like there's things that have to do with, building an online presence or thinking about how to put up websites or those sorts of, digital things that are more branding related. Those are important. Those are important. But the thing that's far more important in coaching and building a coaching is having conversations. And so that's why I think they can be a distraction. Once I have a website, once I have a following, once I have an Instagram account with 20 posts, whatever that is, those are not conversations. And it's conversations where coaches can figure out if the client is someone that they feel called to serve, and the client can figure out if the coach is someone who they trust and can count on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be my overall. I haven't been, pouring money into this because I haven't really wanted to or needed to. I've just focused on building great relationships.
Yeah. So even from the start, you never tried to go on it big. You never tried to scale in a way. So that makes that all makes sense in the approach that you're taking. So right now, in thinking about your goals and going to the 500, and you said you're already making a lot of progress there. What would you say is a challenge for you right now that you're trying to solve for next, let's say short to midterm?
Yeah. I would say the challenge is, what's the challenge? The challenge is probably just that I feel there's always a bit of a tension between how much time I want to have available for my family and how much time I want to have, dedicated to the work that I do. I would say that is definitely the thing that I think about most as my kids, are changing every day and every week. And in general, I think the other thing I would mention just real quickly on the comment you made is I think a lot about impact too. It's not that I think a ton about how this work can create impact and does create impact. But what I have learned and what I would offer to anyone listening is it's really valuable to be honest with yourself about the things that you love doing. And so if you enjoy making videos, for example, or if you enjoy writing, or if you enjoy doing things that are more media driven, that are, will give exposure to a larger audience, then do those things and do them well and figure out how to create the largest amount of impact through those channels. If you don't love those things and what you love is working with people one-on-one, which at least for now is the thing I love most, then what I've done and what I invite others to consider doing is just pour your heart into figuring out how to create the highest level of impact through that work. Because the truth is that working one-on-one with clients, if they are clients who are creating ripples into the world through their businesses, through their efforts, and through other means, can be extraordinarily impactful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in terms of challenges, I think the challenge really is when you coach one-on-one, it's not entirely scalable because your presence is required with each conversation. So I love it. And I do it quite often, most of every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to balance that with having presence for the rest of my life.
How we've seen the one-on-one scale, or kind of like one of the ways maybe, is you'd have to either have other coaches that are gonna do the work for you? So you'd have like other coaches in your team. Did you train to coach just like yourself? Or you'd go into more of like a group coaching approach, or like half group coaching, half one-on-one coaching. Those are kind of like the ways that we've seen other coaches scale the one-on-one. Now, that all depends on like if you want to keep it the way it is right now, which is all personal, because once you have more coaches, it's less about you. It's mostly probably you're coaching the coaches to do the type of coaching that you're doing right now, instead of you coaching yourself. Maybe you take maybe 10% of the clients and the rest just go to the other coaches. Have you ever thought about something like that, or you want to keep yourself involved mostly?
Well, Rexhen, I actually have a informal network of coaches that I refer to because there's, in many cases, I don't have space to take on the clients that come through, or they're not the right fit for me, or vice versa. I'm not the right fit for them. Right. So I've created an informal network, and sure, I've considered that, but I love the work. It is the most fulfilling season of my life without a shadow of a doubt, by far. I absolutely love the work. Every single client is like a work of art, and they're all different, and they're all, incredible in their own way. And I love that process of deep connection and understanding and evolution and expansion that comes from it. And so I feel very content in the moment, but I think that a lot of this comes down to personality and also moment in life. I think it's entirely possible that in 5 years or 10 years, as my kids are older, I may feel called to take an entirely different approach
Hmm.
and be more expansive and out there. I think again, for me, it's really important. And I think for clients, it's really important to just acknowledge the importance of, all the different areas of life that you feel called to attend to, and then find a way to create your life so that it aligns with those priorities. Right. And so, yeah,
Thank you.
I feel good.
Thank you. Thank you, Nate. Thank you for sharing all of that. And so the last question is, and you touched a little bit upon this a little bit earlier. So if there's anything you want to add, so it's like, what advice would you give to other coaches who are looking to scale their impact?
I think the first question is, well, I actually speak to a lot of coaches. I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of coaches since I started this work, mostly because I'm curious and I want to know what other people are doing and how they've approached the work. And I just have been a real connoisseur of this craft.
Mhm.
And oftentimes what I find is they are convinced by someone else or something else that in order to be successful, they have to kind of follow a certain script. And I think one of the most beautiful things about coaching is that there really isn't a script. There are so many different types of coaching, types of support. And the coaching, in my experience, the best coaches in the world, that many of whom I know, I feel so grateful to know, what they do better than anyone is their truth. They're honest about what their strengths are, what their desires and interests are in terms of how they want to serve. And they just follow that, and they don't listen to, structures and formulas that might not resonate with them. Many times, if you want to create real impact, then be honest about the kind of work that you feel inspired to do, because you'll end up spending a lot of time doing it. And then just obsess over how can I create the highest level of impact through that form. And so if you're not the kind of person who wants to build, a huge audience, as an example, then don't build a huge audience, or at least not now. You don't have to right now. You can certainly work your way up to it and work with one-on-one clients. And if you feel called to build a huge audience and you enjoy that, then do that. I have done that for many years of my life. And so in this moment, I'm honoring the stage and place where I am exactly as I would want for any other coach or any other client out, now or in the future. And so I think that would be the biggest piece of advice I have, is be really truly honest with yourself about what's the kind of work you want to do, and then just pour your heart into that work. And I think a lot of times, I guess one other thing I'll say is there are two aspects of coaching. Most coaches love the actual work of sitting with clients and of helping them and supporting them to expand their life, their dreams, their businesses. But the other side is how to create clients. And it's the creating clients that can feel really uncomfortable for a lot of coaches. And I would just say that I don't sell coaching at all. I just simply talk to people and am curious about their lives. And if that leads to a coaching relationship, then it leads to a coaching relationship. I think trusting that process and just having one conversation at a time is so much more powerful than people realize.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nate. And thank you for coming to our podcast. For everyone who wants to connect with you or find you, they can go into LinkedIn and look up Nate Hurd. They'll be able to find your profile. Is there also a website where we can send some people? Is it hurdengroup.com?
Yep. Hurdengroup.com.
Cool. So we'll include that in our description as well so people can find it easily. But yeah, thank you so much, Nate. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Rexhen. My pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.